Hello, my name's Bob Rosenbaum. I'm recording a series of videos to introduce Dayan, Wild Goose Qigong, aimed especially at meditators and particularly Zen meditators, since that's been my practice for the past 50 years or so. I'm doing these videos because I found Dayan Qigong tremendously helpful for my own practice, and so I want to share it with you. Before I go any further, I want to offer my gratitude to my Qigong teacher, Grandmaster Wei Liu, and to my Root Zen teacher, Sojin Mel Weitzman. They were tremendously generous, each of them providing me with a different aspect of practice, but the different leaves came from the same root. During today's video, I'll provide a little bit of background on Dayan Qigong, how it relates to meditation practice, and I'll introduce some fundamentals of Qigong. Now, there are many, many types of Qigong. Qigong simply means practice of Qi. And I'm not going to go into what Qi is here, except to say it's often translated as vital energy. Sometimes in sitting meditation, our energies can get blocked or stagnant or out of balance. But you don't need to believe in Qi to do Qigong. And in fact, in Dayan Qigong, we say, better not to think about Qi. Don't try to move it around or convince yourself about anything. Just do the practice and be open to whatever you experience. Dayan Qigong, Wild Goose Qigong, is one of the most ancient. The legend dates it back to about 1800 years ago at Shaolin Temple, where a monk, Dayan, developed Dayan Qigong to help the physical health and deepen the spiritual practice of the people at the temple. Dayan Qigong is also one of the most comprehensive Qigongs. It's one of the 10 Qigongs that the Chinese government has said, yeah, there's really something here. And Dayan Qigong is quite comprehensive because it consists of warm-up exercises, 64 flowing movements, acupressure, self-massage, and some Taoist meditations. In the second video, I'm going to introduce acupressure massage, and in the third video, I'll begin to introduce the actual movements of the form. I've put a film of me doing the 64 movements of the first set in a corner of the screen, just so you don't have to stare at a boring picture of me throughout this introduction. But I've noticed that many people are eager, maybe a little over-eager, to jump right into the movements themselves. That's understandable, but I do recommend you watch and practice the videos in order to establish a good foundation. At a certain point in my Zen practice, I felt stuck, and I kept trying harder and harder and harder. And a friend of mine suggested that I investigate Dayan Qigong. So, what's the relationship between Zen practice and Qigong? Well, Qigong is a Taoist practice. Zen, as it arose in China, was imbued with Taoism. And although there were many disputes later about how much Taoism differed from or complemented Zen, virtually all of the Zen masters we know of from Tang and Song dynasties would have been deeply imbued with both the Taoist and the Confucianist views of the world. So one of the characteristics of Taoism, which differs a little bit from Zen, is in Zen we sometimes say, practice as if your hair were on fire. Practice more, practice harder. And in Taoism, we say, take it easy. Do less and do less until you reach non-doing, non-doing where nothing's left undone. That's actually a pretty good prescription for Zen practice, but we don't always feel that. And when I first met my wonderful teacher, Master Wei Liu, when I first met Shimu was raised in China, and like many Chinese, she practices Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. But she used to like to tease me. She would say, "Oh, you Buddhists, always thinking about old age, sickness, death. We Taoists say, live a long life, be happy." And enjoying happiness is an important part of Zen practice. We recite the Metta Sutra, and sometimes in wishing happiness for all beings, we may have troubles applying it to ourselves. So Qigong is a wonderful way of learning how to be just natural. And learning how to be just natural in this very body. Dogen has a fascicle, body-mind study of the way. And in that fascicle, he says, for the time being, let us say there are two approaches to studying the Buddha way: to study with mind and to study with body. So when we say mind and body, it seems like they're two separate things, but in reality, mind and body are two sides of the same coin. I like to say mind and body are not connected. Same thing, different appearances. So I won't say much about studying the way with the mind, since most of you meditators have been doing that. But Dogen says to study the way with the body means to study the way with your own body. It is the study of the way with this lump of red flesh. And this body comes from the study of the way. So as we study Qigong, we get to know this body better and better. Skin, flesh, bones, marrow. And find the body of the whole world. And that is just natural. You'll see we do a number of very specific techniques and forms, and we're rather precise about them. And my teacher, Shimu, used to have some difficulties with English, and she'd be trying to explain a form and trying to explain a form, and we wouldn't quite get it, and we wouldn't kind of quite get it. And she'd sometimes sigh and say, just natural, just natural. And Zazen is just natural. What could be more natural than just sitting quietly, doing nothing? But we're not always good at feeling just natural. And so Qigong study helps us find, in Zen we call it our original face before we were born, and I might add, and after we die, but just natural, no straining. And so an important rule of Taoism, two important rules that I really would like to insist on as you practice this is, number one, no straining. Do not push. If you encounter a difficulty, don't back off and quit, but don't push yourself forward and injure yourself. And the other very important point is enjoy yourself. Enjoy this moment. Whatever it brings, pleasant or unpleasant. Easy movement or how do I do this? So One way of doing that, and now we'll get into some of the techniques, is uh, through our tongues. Now, most of you probably know that in meditation, we place the tip of the tongue so that it's lightly touching the upper palate. And part of the trick here is right in the center, gently touching. That actually has physiological and energy effects. In traditional Chinese medicine, there's a very important channel which goes from the tongue straight down the body. This is the Ren channel, and it goes down to the bottom of your torso to a point called the Wei Yin point, which is in between the anus and the genitals. There's another big channel called the Du meridian, which goes from that Wei Yin point, from the base of your torso, all the way up your spine, down, and it reaches the upper palate. And there's a gap between them. And so when we place the tongue on this point, we're closing the gap, and the energy can flow. Plus, we give ourselves a little bit of a biofeedback technique, which is if your tongue is touching and you start getting tense, the tongue will start pushing. And that's a good sign that you need to ease off a little bit. On the other hand, if you've eased off too much and your mind is wandering, and the tongue is liable to come off from that point and flap around as we subvocalize. So one way of centering is simply by keeping the tongue in that place and letting the tongue relax. It's very hard to get angry when your tongue is relaxed. And in fact, there's a tendency when your tongue is touching there gently to smile gently. Avalokiteshvara smiles, hearing all the suffering of the world, smiles. So as you're practicing Qigong or practicing Zen and puzzled and working at it, to keep that calm center with the tongue is very helpful. And my teacher told us, really, your tongue should be there in that meditation position all the time, except when you're eating, which she said, just do the right amount of, or talking. And, talking puts out energy. So what's just the right amount of energy to put into talking? And I'll let you decide what to do with your tongue when you're kissing. But that's another story. There's a verse from the Tao Te Ching which says, people strain to focus their eyes and ears. Sages have a gentle smile for all.